minus 50 degrees. At this temperature, if you throw boiling water into the air, it can break into fine ice crystals before reaching the ground. In strong winds, exposed skin can begin to freeze within minutes. And if a diesel engine that has not been properly prepared for the cold shuts down, restarting it can become nearly impossible. Now look closely. It is 3 a.m. at a remote truck stop in northern Canada. Rows of trucks stand beneath the snow. Most of the cabs are dark, and inside, the drivers are sleeping deeply in warm beds, even though their truck engines are turned off. This is not a trick, and they are not suffering. Before this video ends, you will discover how they survive nights like this, and how a single mistake can cast the shadow of life and death over them. Most people assume that sleeping inside a truck is no different from sleeping anywhere else, just a little tighter and more uncomfortable. But when the temperature drops to minus 50 degrees, that assumption does not just become wrong, it becomes dangerous. While the driver sleeps, 3 things keep them safe. The first is a small device about the size of 2 shoeboxes, something most people have never even seen. The second is a careful routine that begins weeks before the first snowfall. And the third is the reason that, if you ask one of these drivers whether they would rather stay in a hotel, the answer is almost always no. But before we get there, one question needs to be answered, because the answer will prove that the simplest solution in your mind is completely wrong. The cab is freezing cold. So at first, the solution seems obvious. Just leave the main engine running all night. The engine will produce heat, the cab will stay warm, and the problem will be solved. But in reality, it is not that simple. Many states, provinces, and cities across the United States and Canada restrict extended engine idling. The rules and exemptions vary by location, but unnecessary idling can still result in fines. After all, running a massive diesel engine for hours just to heat the cab creates needless pollution and wastes fuel. A heavy-duty truck engine typically burns about 0.8 gallons of diesel per hour while idling, or close to 3 liters. At high idle, fuel consumption can be even greater. That means several gallons of fuel can disappear over a single 8 to 10 hour night. Repeated throughout the winter, the cost can easily rise into the thousands of dollars. And fuel is not the only concern. Running the engine for long periods without a load can lead to unnecessary wear, carbon buildup, and additional maintenance problems, especially in remote areas where even a minor mechanical issue can become dangerous. That is why the main engine is turned off whenever possible. And this brings us to the real question at the heart of this video. If the engine is off, what keeps these drivers alive? To understand the answer, you first need to know what these drivers are actually fighting against. And the problem is not just the cold outside. The truck cab itself is part of the danger. A truck cab is built from metal, glass, and multiple joints and seals. When the air outside is brutally cold and the wind is strong, heat begins escaping rapidly through these surfaces. Even though the cab is insulated, that insulation is nowhere near as thick as the walls of a house. So once the heating system shuts down, the comfortable temperature inside can fall very quickly. But how quickly? To understand that, you have to remember that the exact timing is not the same for every truck. In a typical truck, if no heating system is running, the cab can reach the outside temperature in less than 45 minutes. However, the actual rate can vary depending on the size of the cab, the quality of its insulation, the amount of glass, and the strength of the wind outside. At minus 5 degrees, this may be uncomfortable or even manageable, but at minus 50 degrees, it can become deadly. The temperature inside the cab may begin dropping by roughly 1 degree every minute. Within 45 minutes to an hour, the temperature inside and outside can become nearly the same, turning the cab from a bedroom into a freezer. As a result, hypothermia can set in, and death may occur within 30 minutes to several hours. So, engineers had to create a system that could keep the cab warm all night with the main engine turned off, use very little fuel, reduce the need for extended idling, and still comply with the law. This small device has become one of the most overlooked technologies on the road. It is called a diesel cab heater. On many long-haul trucks operating in cold regions, this shoebox-sized heater is installed beneath the cab or along the chassis. A narrow fuel line connects directly to the truck's diesel tank. With its own ignition system, fan, and thermostat, it operates completely independently of the main engine. Companies such as Webasto, Espar, and Eberspecher have been producing these heaters for decades. Their greatest advantage is fuel efficiency. Instead of burning several liters of diesel per hour, like the main engine, a typical cab heater uses only about 0.1 to 0.5 liters per hour, depending on how much heat is needed. It draws a small amount of diesel from the tank and burns it inside a compact combustion chamber. The heat is then transferred to the air inside the cab through a heat exchanger, while the exhaust gases are carried outside through a separate pipe. When properly installed, those fumes never mix with the air the driver breathes. The system is not completely silent, but all you usually hear is the soft hum of the fan and fuel pump. As long as there is enough fuel in the tank and sufficient power in the batteries, this small device can keep the cab warm for several nights. However, the diesel cab heater is only the more basic part of this system. Some trucks are equipped with something far more powerful, something that does more than heat the cab. It can turn the entire space into a small apartment on wheels. It is called an APU, an auxiliary power unit. Not all APUs are the same. Some models use a small diesel engine mounted beside the chassis, while more modern systems rely on a separate battery bank. In both cases, the main purpose is the same: to provide the driver with heat, air conditioning, and electrical power while the main engine remains turned off. A diesel-powered APU has its own small engine, fuel supply, alternator, and control system. It can operate the cab's heating and air conditioning, keep the truck's batteries charged, and, in some models, even warm the main engine's coolant during extreme cold. When connected to an inverter, it can also power lights, a refrigerator, phones, laptops, and other small electrical devices. A battery-powered system, on the other hand, can maintain the cab's temperature and electrical supply for a limited time without using a small diesel engine. However, how long it runs depends on the battery charge and the amount of power being used. As a result, in a properly equipped truck, a driver can spend the night without leaving the main engine running for hours. But this is where the question eventually enters every new driver's mind. What happens if the APU suddenly fails? Remember that question. We will return to it shortly, and the answer will reveal how a single mistake can cast the shadow of life and death over them. But first, we need to talk about something that begins long before that night, because even the best heater in the world cannot save you if the entire truck has not been prepared for winter. Preparing for a night at -50 degrees begins weeks before the first snowfall, and most of it comes down to small details that ordinary people would never even think about. The first is fuel. When diesel becomes extremely cold, the wax-like compounds inside it begin forming crystals. The exact temperature at which this happens depends on the type and blend of the fuel. But once those crystals clog the filter, both the main engine and the cab heater, drawing fuel from the same tank, can shut down. The solution is to use winter-grade diesel in advance, or add anti-gel according to the manufacturer's instructions. In the far north, ignoring this preparation is like inviting death to your door. The second issue is the battery. In extreme cold, the chemical reactions inside a battery slow down. Its usable power decreases, while the engine requires even more energy to start. That is why some winter-prepared trucks carry as many as 4 separate auxiliary batteries in addition to their main starting batteries. These power the heater, fan, lights, and electrical systems inside the cab. The third issue is the curtain. Yes, just an insulated curtain. Instead of heating the entire cab, it helps keep only the smaller sleeping area warm. For example, some battery-powered parked HVAC systems are designed to maintain a comfortable temperature for up to 12 hours when the curtain is closed. And if the driver has to step outside, 3 loose layers of clothing, insulated boots, gloves, and face protection become their final personal defense against the cold. Individually, these preparations may not seem very important, but at -50 degrees, they work together to transform an ordinary truck into a safe shelter for the night. There is one final technique that truly explains the title of this video. At some truck stops, terminals, and parking areas in northern regions, electrical outlets are installed beside designated spaces. Drivers plug an engine block heater into them. This device keeps the engine coolant or metal components slightly warm, preventing the oil from becoming excessively thick and making the engine easier to start in the morning. In other words, while the cab stays warm with a diesel heater, the the truck's engine is also being prepared separately. At -50 degrees, a diesel engine that has been sitting in the cold for hours can become extremely difficult to start without enough battery power, the right fuel, and proper preheating. But what happens when there is no electricity? In that case, some trucks rely on fuel-fired coolant heaters, diesel APUs, or automatic engine start systems to keep the engine ready. If necessary, the driver may also start the main engine at scheduled intervals. Because at temperatures like these, a truck failing to start in the middle of nowhere is not just a mechanical problem, it can quickly become a matter of life and death. Now we return to the unfinished question. How can a single mistake cast the shadow of life and death over these drivers? And what happens if the heater or APU suddenly fails? Imagine this. It is 3 a.m. and you are parked at an isolated rest area in the far north. Outside, the temperature is -48 degrees, and the nearest truck stop is roughly 60 to 80 kilometers away. If the truck will not start, there is no way to reach a hotel. Then the cold wakes you up. There is no light on the heater control panel. The APU is dead. The warmth inside the cab is slowly disappearing, while the cold outside pushes through the metal walls and glass. The temperature inside the cab is already dropping by nearly 1 degree every minute. After an hour, the situation will be far worse. And that brings us to the next question. How do drivers survive a situation like this? The answer is simple: preparation. An expedition-grade sleeping bag, extra blankets, 3 layers of clothing, gloves, and face protection help preserve body heat. A communication device can be used to call for help. And if the truck has an automatic engine start system or a second source of heat, that may become the driver's final lifeline. That is why one rule stands above all others in extreme cold. Never leave the cab unless you are certain you can get back inside. In strong winds, exposed skin can begin to freeze within minutes. On a night like this, luck does not make the decision. Preparation, a calm mind, and taking the right action at the right time do. Those are the things that determine whether the driver survives the night or gives in to the cold and accepts death. Now comes the part that surprises everyone. Ask a driver who has spent a properly prepared night at -50 degrees whether they would trade that night for a hotel room. Many experienced drivers would say no, because on a long journey, the truck is no longer just a workplace. Over time, it becomes their own small private world. Their own bed, a familiar blanket, a cup of coffee, and the freedom to control the temperature exactly the way they want. All of it can make this metal cab feel more like home than an unfamiliar hotel room. Outside, the night is buried beneath the snow. Even with the distant sound of an engine, an APU, or a refrigerated trailer, a different kind of peace settles inside the cab. The soft hum of the heater, snow gathering on the glass, and a small warm bed make it feel as if a tiny lighthouse is glowing in the middle of a frozen desert. In that moment, being alone does not feel frightening. It feels like a rare chance to be alone with yourself. A bowl of hot soup, some eggs, oatmeal, or a cup of coffee may be enough to keep the body warm and energized. But as the night grows deeper, another truth begins to emerge from behind that peace: loneliness. Many drivers spend 3 to 4 weeks at a time away from their families. The hardest part is not simply missing home. It is slowly realizing that their family has learned to continue daily life without them. And after being away for so long, some drivers may return home and feel like a guest inside their own house. That is why the cab is both a shelter and a test. It keeps the body warm, but reminds the heart just how far away home really is. This is one of the greatest sacrifices a truck driver makes. The road gives them freedom, but with every mile, it takes away a little more time with the people they love. Now it is your turn. If you are a truck driver, what was the coldest night you ever spent inside your cab? And if you had the choice, would you trade that night for a hotel room? And if you are watching this video from the comfort of your home, tell us in the comments, what is the temperature where you are right now? If you learned something new from today's video, give it a like and subscribe to the channel. I will see you again in the next video.